Bill has copies of his CD available for purchase after the service, and you can meet with Bill if you want to at the table located in the lobby. And our speaker today is Reverend Stephen McAfee with his message, What is Salvation?
Hello. I'm going to pause for a moment because this is not the best guitar stand in the world, and I have a thing about guitars not being sturdy. So I'm just going to make sure that that's staying. Yeah, some of you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So anyway. No, I'm good. I'll just stick it in my So I was, first of all, thank you for the music. And second of all, this is not my topic for the day, but tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, and my dad was an Irishman born on St. Patrick's Day, and tomorrow would have been 100 years old. So special day for me. So the What is Salvation talk, I don't know how many of you have ever had this experience of being probably not in this church, probably in a more traditional one, and somebody coming up to you and saying, "Are you saved?" Yeah. And so a few of you are familiar with that experience. Okay. And I don't know where you are with all that, and it's none of my business, frankly. But for me, I never know what to say to that. Because if I say yes, I know that they're going to understand that to mean I have the same beliefs that they do, which probably I don't. I probably don't have the same beliefs as many of you either, because we all have a unique way of dealing with the divine. And if I say no, they're probably going to interpret that as understanding that Jesus isn't important to me, or I reject all of that, which also isn't true. So it's kind of this being in the middle. How do you answer that without a 3-hour discourse about what salvation is? So today we're having a 3-hour discourse on what salvation is. Not really. Obviously, the Christian church talks about it. Did Yeshua actually talk about it? And the answer is yes, he did. Does unity actually talk about it? And the answer is yes, it does. So I'm going to go way back. So this is a mini history lesson. I'm going to go way back before unity started as silent unity by Charles and Merle. Before that, what they studied and what this grew out of. There was a movement in the last half of the 1800s called the Transcendentalist movement. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not have heard of it. The Fillmores positively heard of it and studied it. It was started by Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau and Frederick Hedge and Margaret Fuller and some of the great thinkers back in that era. And the Transcendentalists believed that God was not confined to a religion, and that experiencing God for ourselves, no matter what your particular faith or belief system or background, when you have an experience of the divine for yourself, it is always a transcendent experience. It is always an expansive experience in which you feel somehow connected to or part of something bigger than you. And it transcends your belief system, it transcends who you think you are, and it's a much bigger experience than all of that. So the Transcendentalists spawned a number of movements, and a lot of the New Thought stuff has much of its origin in the Transcendentalist teaching, the American Transcendentalist Club teaching, which was just prior to the key people who became the emerging factor in the New Thought and Unity movements. And what the Transcendentalists largely studied was an Indian work, East Indian work, called Bhagavad Gita. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that either. It's part of a much larger Indian epic work called the Mahabharata. But the Gita, in short, Bhagavad Gita means the song of the Lord, or the Lord's song. And in Hindu cosmology, in Jewish Christian cosmology, God spoke creation into existence. In Indian cosmology, God sang creation into existence. Kind of like that personally. So they studied a lot of this work. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of see what the Gita says about salvation and compare that to what Fillmore's taught about salvation and compare that to what Jesus taught about salvation. So this really could be a 3-hour lecture, but I'm not going to keep it very short. So this is just scratching the surface. But if you're interested, if you want to study some of the things that Fillmore studied, first read the Bible. I don't know how many times we say that, but not enough. Because there's so much there. And again, as I've said before, and others have said before too, if you just start trying to read it on your own without any background or context or assistance, it can be confusing, it can be overwhelming, it can also seem dry and lifeless, and like, why am I reading all these names that I don't know what they are, and places that I don't know what they are, and things that I never heard of happen, and who cares? But if you're interested in studying the Bible and haven't much facility with that yet, there are people here who can help with that. And there are Bible study groups, there are teachers and things that are really helpful in getting into that. But the Fillmores studied the Bible in depth. They also studied the works of these transcendentalists, and they also studied the Gita. So let me tell you a little bit about, so if you want to read some of that, read the Gita. There's all kinds of English translations. Also read the works of Ralph Waldo Emerson and the works of Henry David Thoreau, which are in abundance and easy to find online or in books or all kinds of things. So, the Gita. Bill's song was about the power of love to transform us. I mean, that's my take on your song. Right. And that's what the Gita is about also. So the Lord's Song, there's a chapter in particular, it's the 18th, the Gita is divided up into discourses. The 18th discourse is about bhakti. Bhakti is the Hindu word for loving devotion. And according to the Gita, that is the highest, most direct, and quickest path to God realization, is loving devotion. Ever heard anybody else say that kind of an idea? Yeah, so the Gita doesn't use the word salvation, it uses the word moksha, which means liberation or freedom from that which inhibits, constricts, or entraps you. So here's what the Gita says. This is the 6th chapter, 47th verse, and it also talks about yoga and yogis. So let me stop there a second. Yoga is a Hindu word meaning union, to unite with, and yogi is somebody who practices a form of yoga. So this is 647. It says, of all the yogis, and there are many different types of yoga in Hindu practice, many of them, the one with the greatest faith always is focused on me meaning the divine, or what we call God. Thinks of me as living within himself. Does this sound familiar? Yeah. And renders transcendental, loving service to me through the people he interacts with. Does that sound familiar? He is most intimately united with me of all the yogis and follows the highest path. So that's its description of salvation in the Gita, is somebody who's continually focused on the divine, who always thinks of the divine as dwelling within himself, and who is focused on rendering service to God by the way he treats people. Doesn't that kind of sum up what we talk about? Mm-hmm. Can you kind of see that influence in a lot of what the Fillmores wrote about? I'm not suggesting this is the only influence they had. but it was one of them. Okay, so Jesus also talked about that. And Jesus said, as you've heard many times here, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Doesn't that say pretty much the same thing? In a bit shorter form. So, now if we have a person who is practicing salvation in this sense of salvation, what is that person like? The Gita describes that. This is in the 12th chapter, 13th verse. The devotees who are truly dear to me, who truly want to be united with me. That's the condition. Those who are near to me and truly want to be united with me. The me here again referring to God or the divine. Are free from malice toward all living beings. They are friendly, even to those who oppose them. They are compassionate. They are free from attachment to their possessions, and they have freed themselves from the dominion of ego. They can remain calmly poised, whether in happy or distressful circumstances. They are forgiving, and ever content, because they are continually united with me in loving devotion. That's an interesting description, don't you think? And I don't know about you, but that's how I wish somebody would describe me, is living like that. Now the fact is I don't live like that. I don't. But I manage to do that sometimes. And sometimes I manage 2 or 3 out of those, and not some others. But that's what I would like to be like, is that. So, now coming up to Charles Fillmore. This is from a book he wrote called The Mysteries of Genesis. It's chapter 6, part of chapter 6. The promise of salvation is for everyone, not just believers. But man must attain it. Man is like a child at school. He must study the lessons and pay attention and then apply them. Does any of that sound familiar? Those who are following Jesus are being given lessons every day. And they must learn to listen to their own inspiration to receive those lessons. Then, like Jesus, if they face a big problem, they pray and pray all night if necessary. This is another description of how to attain salvation. And if they remain faithful to the Spirit, they will, without doubt, gain the victory. For the true teacher is the Holy Spirit, and everyone gets lessons from this teacher in their own way. Some through inspiration, some through dreams, some through meditation, some through visions, some through sudden flashes of understanding, some through quiet urges. The Spirit uses the avenue most accessible in the student. I'm going to pause there for a minute. You are not going to be taught by God the same way I am. You're not going to be taught by God the same way Wanda is, or the same way the person sitting next to you is, and you're not going to have the same relationship with God as any of us do, or as anyone else does. Because you are one. Just literally take a quick look around the room. Do you see any faces that look exactly like yours? Nope. Nope. Do you hear any voices that sound exactly like yours? Nope. Do you know anybody here that has exactly the same fingerprints you do, or the same retinal scans that you do? Nope. Do you have anybody here that's identical to you? Nope. Take a look in the world and see if you can find one, because there isn't one. Not one. In 7 billion people, not one. That's kind of extraordinary, don't you think? So if God makes that many unique creations, that many unique living souls, why in the world would we think he's going to use the same methods in the same communication and tell them all the same thing in exactly the same way. You could have done that if they were all the same creature. It's unique. It's one by one. And what you need to trust is not my inspiration, not Michael's inspiration, not Wanda's inspiration, not Unity's inspiration, not the Fillmore's inspiration, not even Yeshua's inspiration. What you need to trust is yours. You need to trust yours. God's voice is talking to you. Not talking to you to instruct me, and not talking to me to instruct you. Talking to me to instruct me. Talking to you to instruct you. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what you think. I don't know what you're afraid of. I don't know what you struggle with. I mean, I know some of that stuff. But I don't know at the deep levels what's going on in you. But God does. So who's best suited to help you through all that? Me? A preacher? A minister? No. Can they help? I hope so. But that's not the source of your help. The source of your help is to pay attention to how God's communicating with you. And as Charles just wrote, it's different for every one of us. Maybe you're a person that dreams a lot, and you get a lot of understanding and inspiration from your dreams. Pay attention. Maybe you're a person who never dreams or never remembers them. Then don't worry about not having dreams. Maybe you get little inspirations. Ooh, I should call somebody right now. And you call them and something big's going on. You didn't know that, but the God in you did. And you acted on it, and you made an important connection. Maybe you watch movies a lot. You think, gee, I don't do much spiritual inspiration and stuff, I just watch movies. Although when I watch movies, I get all these awarenesses that apply to my life. And I can watch a cartoon and tell you how that represented Jesus. It's like, really? Are you sure? Like, yeah, it really did. Well, for you, maybe it did. Maybe that's how God's speaking to you, is through cartoons, you know? I mean, who knows? So we need to pay attention to that. I'm going on with Fillmore. This is still from the Mysteries of Genesis book. To be saved, according to the standard of salvation set by Jesus, we must come to sit upon the throne in the kingdom of heaven with him. This kingdom is real, and it is to be attained not after we're dead, but while we still live in the body. That's not what traditional churches teach. That is what this church taught in the very beginning. It's always taught that. So, I'm going to read you one more thing, and this is going to be either meaningless to you, or controversial to you, or confirmational to you. Probably going to be one of those three things. And if it's controversial to you, I didn't write it. If it's confirmational to you, I chose to read it. So, sorry, Charles. But anyway, here we go. Jesus still lives right now. He shares the spiritual essence of this world, and he is in constant contact with those who turn toward him in their thoughts and prayer. This is not an idle promise or a false one that he would save anyone who had trust in him. Jesus broadcast the electrons of his blood into the race thought atmosphere. Those vibrations are available to anyone who will open up to them. These vibrations become the centers of energy in those who appropriate them, and thus can men gradually be transformed in their heart and their very blood in their bodies regenerated. That is the spiritual and real meaning of how we are saved by Jesus. Isn't that an interesting teaching? So there's a tendency to believe, and up to you what you believe. There's a tendency to believe that Jesus was then, and that he might have taught some things that are helpful to us now, but he's not helpful to us now. If we actually believe that the soul doesn't die at death, then his didn't either. So if his soul is still alive, and his essence is soul, because our essence is not body. It doesn't say in the Bible anywhere, your essence is this physical body. If our essence is soul, if it's a spiritual essence, which is what we teach, and if that was true of Yeshua, then his soul is his spiritual essence, not his body, which is now gone. And if his soul's alive and your soul's alive, why can't you communicate? The answer is you can. That doesn't mean you do, but it means you can. So, the work that Yeshua did in his life embodiment as Jesus over 2,000 years ago is still the work he's involved in very much. Spiritually, not physically. And he's still available to people. And and I know a couple of you, I know for sure a couple of you have, but if any of you ever actually have an encounter with him, you will definitely know it. And it's a phenomenal thing. And when you do, you begin to understand why people were so in awe of him who met him physically. But whether you believe that or not, the essence of salvation according to the Gita, the essence of salvation according to the Fillmores in Unity, the essence of salvation according to Yeshua is, number one, personal. You have to do it. You have to do the work. You have to come to the awareness within yourself. And it starts by all those things that I told you, that you have to focus on always being attentive to God and learning how God communicates with you, as opposed to watching God communicate with somebody else or hearing about how somebody else communicated with God. That's all inspirational, and that's all hopefully motivational. But if you let it stop there and don't begin to apply it, it won't be transformational, which is what Bill's song is about. If Bill heard, and probably you did before your awakening, if Bill heard about the power of God's love, and Bill had somebody else talk to him about the power of God's love, and Bill read books about the power of God's love, all that could be inspirational for him. But being touched by it was a different thing. Would you say so?
Amen. Yep.
Yeah. Receiving it is not the same thing as hearing about it. When I was much younger, a young man and interested in young women, and knew all about how the biology parts of that worked, I had lots of thoughts about it. The reality was a whole different experience. Sorry for a crude example, but it's one almost all of you can. So different, yeah? The reality is different. Here's one too. We have a really good friend who is constantly talking about how he would like to be in a committed relationship with a woman. He wants to find a woman to be his spouse, his wife, his partner. He really, really, really wants that. He's sincere. He really, really, really wants that. And he has all these ideas about what that woman would be like and what that relationship would be like, and not one of them are real. Do you get what I'm saying? Now when he finds a woman who's a potential and really likes him, she isn't that image. She's the person she is. And their relationship isn't perfect. His idea is the perfect relationship is she will do what I want whenever I want the way I want. How many men out there have that in their life? So, or women conversely, you know. But that's not real. And one time a friend of mine told him that what he wanted wasn't really a woman, it was his fantasy, which he didn't like, but it was pretty close to the truth, I think. So, I can only laugh at that because I did that for years. So, it's like, and the reality is different than how we imagine it. The reality of God is just as different than how we imagine it. Actually stepping into that real presence is different than thinking about it, different than imagining it, different than reading about it, and different than hearing about it. And what Fillmore's and Jesus and the Gita, I believe, are all trying to get us to do is step into it. I read a thing a long time ago that's always stuck with me, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. Stop reading the menu and eat the food. The menu provides no nutrition to you at all. So, a couple of key ideas I'd like to leave you with, and then we'll do a meditation. One is salvation is not a future event that happens after you die. Yeshua did not teach that. Fillmore's did not teach that. It is something you can experience now while you're alive. Second of all, if you read what salvation is through the entire Bible, from Genesis through Revelation, you'll find that it almost never talks about it in future tense. It's either present or past tense. Read through Psalms, where David talks constantly about God saving him. He's not talking about God saving him from the devil in the future somewhere after he dies. He's talking about God saved him from the guy who was trying to kill him. God saved him from the pestilence. God saved him from the disease. God saved him from his enemies. God saved him from the plague. God saves us now, because it matters now. And also, one of the things Yeshua showed was when people were afflicted by demons, whether they're really demons or whether they're some other thing, a psychological aberration or an inner torture, do we not have enough inner demons of our own, whether they're externally real or not, that we struggle with? Yeah. What did Yeshua do was free people from that. He saved them from that affliction. Right now. People who have got, Bill mentioned his addiction. People who have had addiction and now aren't addicts anymore, you don't think that's salvation? That's salvation right now. People who've been traumatized and abused in horrific ways and heal from it, you don't think that's salvation? That's real salvation, really at work right now. It's not a belief system. It's a transformational way of living that we embrace right now. And in my experience and the experience of these three things I'm quoting, the most powerful way to do that is through love. It's the most effective, it's the most permanent, and it's the most it's the one that will open your eyes to what God's really all about. So we're going to do a little meditation for a couple of minutes, and we're going to do it a little bit differently today. So Bill has a piece of music that he created, which is called Healing Sounds. Mm-hmm. Ooh, I got it. Called Healing Sounds, that they're going to play on the speaker system here so you can hear it. And I'm going to let that play for just a moment once they start it. And then I'm going to just say a few words and lead you into a short meditation. So we're going to have the whole music playing through the whole background of the meditation. So whenever you guys can cue that up, we're set to go. So just bring yourself to a quiet place. Close your eyes if you like. let love in and let go of everything else. Draw this to a close in the words of Yeshua. Love one another the way that I have loved you. And if you love me, feed my sheep. Thank you, God. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.